everyone, so I hope you are all having a good start to your August because we are going to be doing my July wrap up. So I am super excited to do this video. I cannot believe that July is already over. I know I say this every month. I'm like, oh my gosh, this month is going by so fast, but like seriously, what is going on? Why are these months just like happening within a blink of an eye? Like what is going on? What's happening? Anyway, it is so hot today, so I really want to get through this wrap up as quickly as possible. We're not going to be doing a TBR in this video, so we are going to split up these videos, see if I'll do my TBR later. But right now, we're going to focus on the books that I read in July. So I ended up reading 7 books this month. I didn't really finish a book until later on in the month. It took me a while. I don't know what was going on. I was so worried that I was getting into a slump, because I did not want to get into a slump. I'm like, no, this cannot be happening. And thankfully, I was able to finally finish a book, and it kind of jump-started me and got me back into like finishing a few books a week. So we're all good, we're all fine. I feel so much better, and I don't feel like I'm in that slump anymore, which is good. So the first book that I ended up reading in July was Behind the Scenes by Christina C. Jones. So this is like an adult contemporary romance. I think that I once saw Mina Reeds read this book, and I ended up seeing it on Hoopla, and I was like super intrigued. So I decided to pick it up, I decided to check it out, and I ended up rating it 3 out of 5 stars. For me, this book did have a lot of potential. I really liked the romance, I liked the characters, I liked how steamy and spicy it was. However, the drawback for me with this book was mainly the plot and the structure. I felt like it was super messy, it felt really all over the place, and like some parts of the book were really fast-paced, other parts of the book were really slow. I felt like there were a few chapters that like could have completely been taken out, and I feel like maybe this book just needed like another round of editing and then it would have been perfect. But the pacing really held this book back for me, and it was also kind of the reason why I was worried about getting into a slump, because sometimes when a book's pacing is all over the place, it's very jarring, and it can sometimes get me not as excited about reading if I feel like the book that I'm currently reading needs to be edited. Like with this book, I started it June 30th and I didn't finish it until July 13th. So it took me 2 whole weeks to finish this book. So that's kind of a big issue. I don't really like to take that long to read a book. And I would say like 50% of the time, if it's taking me that long to finish a book, there's usually some issues with it. But I did think this book was super cute. It's basically about these 2 people, Logan and Pierre. Logan, she is the daughter of like this family who has always been lawyers. They're like very well respected, very rich, very, you know, they are great lawyers, I guess. And then there's Pierre, and he's kind of within this other family who is also very well respected, but they are more like actors, directors, etc. But Logan wants a change of pace. She doesn't want to be a lawyer like the rest of her family. She wants to get into the entertainment business, and so she ends up working, I don't know necessarily for Pierre or with Pierre, but they end up working together and end up kind of like falling for each other. And I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, it was really just a huge pacing issue, and that was really what detracted from this book. There were just too many things that I felt were completely unnecessary for this book, and it was kind of long, but overall I did really enjoy it. I would recommend it if you're looking for something a bit more steamy, because really those scenes were like the highlight of the book for me. The next book that I read in the month of July really disappointed me. Like this one was probably the biggest disappointment this month. It just did not go well, and that was The Last True Poets of the Sea by Julia Drake. And I ended up picking up this book initially because this was recommended to me as a Folklore by Taylor Swift recommendation, and so I think that I kind of went into this book with different expectations to the reality of this book. I ended up not rating it when I finished it or DNF'd it. I just felt like it wasn't fair because I went into this book with false expectations. So it's not necessarily the book's fault, it's more of my fault. I was expecting something that was going to be a bit more lush and beautiful and haunting, the same way that Folklore is, and this book just was not at all like Folklore. They're like not even aesthetically, not even just like anything about this book. It's very simplistically written. There's no like metaphorical language, there's no like descriptive language. It's very straightforward, bare bones language. And for me, I prefer to read books that are a bit more descriptive, almost bordering on like purple prose. Like I just like really, really beautiful prose. This, not even close. Not even close to Taylor. Like, it doesn't give you anything. Okay, I think I have like the perfect way to describe this book. It's a mix of the movie Heathers and the movie Aquamarine. Two of my favorite movies of all time, and I think that if I had known that it was going to be a mix of those two movies, that I would have loved it. I would have enjoyed it more. I would have had like those correct expectations going in. I would have been like, okay, so it's not going to be lush, it's not going to be descriptive, but it's going to be funny. It's going to be fun and like lighthearted. I mean, it's not necessarily lighthearted, but I feel like the approach to some of the heavier topics in this book is definitely lighter in tone. It's not necessarily like taking it super seriously, at least in like my experience with reading this book. I just couldn't enjoy it because I wanted something that was going to be lush and beautiful and make me cry or make me feel things, and I just didn't feel anything when I was reading this book. Like, I was so bored. I didn't like any of the characters. Like, all the characters were so boring and so one-dimensional and just felt like caricatures of character tropes. And there were so many moments in this book where the main character doesn't actually learn anything by experience. They learn things by watching other people experience things, which isn't necessarily exciting for a book. You know what I mean? Like, yes, in life, I know for me, I personally like to learn things from watching other people experience them, but I would never write that in a book because I just know that's not going to be interesting to a reader. And I was correct with this because it was not interesting to me, the reader. I do think it's really funny because I'm reading some of the quotes on the back of the book, and someone, David Arnold, I don't know who this person is, says that it's a lush and provocative story, which I didn't get at all. Rustic and lovely, no. Hilarious, yeah, there were some funny moments. I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say hilarious. I'd say maybe like a little funny. Insightful, I didn't get that from there. Swashbuckling, no. I got pretty far into the book. I'd say about 60% in. No swashbuckling at all. A lyrical adventure, I found the prose to be pretty basic. I didn't find it to be lyrical or lush at all. And I have pretty high standards for that, so I will say that like maybe my standards for lyrical and lush, which is like Taylor Swift, at least from like going into this book, didn't reach Taylor levels. As you can tell, I was like really disappointed by this book. And should I necessarily be raking this book over the coals? Probably not, but it did waste a lot of my time. The next book I read was a literal dream, a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it, and that is The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. This is beautiful prose. Like, I kept having to pause this book. I read it physically, but I had to keep like putting it down and just being like, what did I just read? Like, this prose is absolutely beautiful and like exceptional for a romance book. It's pretty good. It's pretty amazing. There were so many moments in this where I'm like, I wish that I was the type of person who annotated books, because I would annotate the living hell out of this book. It was so good. Basically, this is about these two writers. They have been co-authors in the past, Katrina and Nathan, and they ended up having a really big falling out and have not talked to each other in well over a year. But their debut novel was like this breakout novel and everybody loved it and it was super popular, but they haven't written anything together since. And so they need to wrap up their contract and fulfill everything that they need to do, so they end up writing another book together. So I really enjoyed this book. I found it to be so entertaining. I loved the writing style. I am not typically a co-author type of person, as you know if you've seen my other videos. I've spoken a lot about me not really liking a lot of books that are co-authored, but for some reason Emily and Austen are just like a match made in heaven. They are so good together. I never felt like that jarring sensation of, oh, this was clearly written by this author and then this section was clearly written by the other author. Like, that never happened. I was so impressed. And I'd never really read an Emily Wibberley Austen Sigmund Broca book before. I own a few of them, but I've never read any of them. This is the first one and I am so impressed. Like, literally I cannot wait to read more from them. And they just announced that they have another adult romance coming out and it is Taylor Swift inspired. I'm so excited. I posted it on my story. I was freaking out. And yeah, I am loving them together as like this co-writing duo. I definitely need to read their other books, so that might happen sometime soon. And yeah, I absolutely enjoyed this. I cannot say enough good things. I listened to folklore the entire time I read this book and it fit perfectly. It was very much like the way that it fit with Beach Read. It fits perfectly with this book as well. The next book that I read was I Might Regret This, Essays, Drawings, Vulnerabilities, and Other Stuff by Abby Jacobson, and I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. So if you don't know who Abby Jacobson is, you might know her from Broad City. I've actually been rewatching Broad City recently, and I have so many mixed feelings about this show. I have ever since I first watched it, but I ended up seeing this book on, I think, Libby, and I decided I wanted to borrow it. It was super short. I'm like, this will be a fun, easy read, and I did actually enjoy this. Like, it wasn't my favorite nonfiction book ever, but it was fun and it like got me to pass the time a little bit, so that's great. Really, this book was just like a lot of fun little musings from Abby herself. And it was really interesting to get to see more about who she is as a person and like some little background information on Broad City. And overall, I really ended up enjoying it. So I do recommend it if you're looking for a cute little fun celebrity memoir type of book. This will be perfect. Like, you can read it in maybe a sitting. The next book I really didn't like, and that was I Feel Bad About My Neck and Other Thoughts on Being a Woman by Nora Ephron. And I ended up giving this book a 2 out of 5 stars because I really felt like this book was insanely superficial. And I also felt like that about her other book that I read from her just a couple of months ago. I was really disappointed in this book mainly because I have watched her, like, 3 of her biggest movies recently for the first time. And also I love Carly from UnCarly, and she has recommended Nora Ephron's books before. So I kind of went in with high expectations, and even with this one, knowing that I didn't like her other book, I'm like, you know what, I'll give her a second chance. It's not that big of a deal. It's a super short book, but it just ended up not doing it for me, and I was so disappointed. I just felt like, why am I reading all of this? None of this has a point. A lot of it is just very much like obsessed with my looks and like obsessed with not being fat and all of that other stuff, and it just wasn't really relevant to anything that I've experienced personally. So maybe this book would resonate more with like white women or women of a certain age. It just wasn't like, I was not the target audience for this book at all, and it was painfully obvious. So yeah, couldn't relate to this one, didn't really see where it was coming from, and I personally did not like it. So yeah, that was unfortunate, but of course I do still love Nora Ephron's movies. The second to last book that I read in the month of July was Under One Roof, and it's technically a novella. It's by Ali Hazelwood. It's funny because I have not finished her actual like real book. Still in the middle of The Love Hypothesis. I definitely need to finish it this month. But however, I did read the novella, and unfortunately I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars as well. This one didn't really love. I found that the main character was like super annoying, and I did liken her to Rachel Berry in my review because she just gave me Rachel vibes, and it was just very grating on me the entire time I was listening to this audiobook. I did, however, like some of the steamy sex scenes. I also did really appreciate the love interest. He's giving us some demisexual rep and we love that. But other than that stuff, those were really the only two highlights of this book. So unfortunately, I did have to give it a 2 out of 5 stars because it just was not giving what I wanted it to give. And the very last book that I read this month was The X Hex by Erin Sterling, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I absolutely enjoyed myself the entire time I was reading this. In one of my updates for this book, I compared it to a DCOM. I'm like, this is giving me DCOM vibes. It's very much like Halloween Town, Twitches, that kind of thing. But it's like an adult romance, so there's definitely some steam and spice in here. But I just thought it was such a cute book, and I'm so glad that I read it before Halloween. I feel like this is one I would definitely recommend you checking out. It was so cute, very much like second chance romance. Semi like these two don't really like each other, they get on each other's nerves, but there's definitely some connection there, there's definitely some attraction there. So yeah, it was so cute, and I really enjoyed getting to read this. It was, you know what it was giving? It was very like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I love Sabrina. So yeah, if you're looking for like a cute little Halloween inspired romance, this is the perfect book for you. Check it out before Halloween. I absolutely enjoyed it. It's getting really hot, so I'm glad that I finished this up before I ended up overheating, because I definitely want to put my hair up and get it off of my neck. It is just, it's like a warm, thick blanket over me. It's not helping. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this July wrap up. Let me know down below in the comments what you ended up reading in the month of July. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. Also go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. All the links are down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye! Ooh, I thought it'd be me and you.